Welcome back to Aspire for Me. I'm Jesse, and we're joined once again by my wife, Kim. Today, we wanted to discuss the 4% rule. This is a topic that I know basically, and I would encourage everybody to go look deeper into it after we discuss it today. But I can get the basics out here. Kim hasn't quite had as much experience with it, so we're going to go ahead and kind of teach her what the 4% rule is. So, what have you heard about the 4% rule so far, Kim?
From my understanding, the 4% rule indicates how much money you need to have invested so that when you pull the money off to live off of it, you're living off of 4% of the returns.
Yeah, that's a very good basic understanding. So pretty much there was a study done to where people wanted to know how much of their investments they could live on and not draw down on the principal when pulling off of those investments to live off of. So they took a bunch of different groupings of dates and did a study based off of if you live between this time and this time or this time and this time. And they did different rates of return and rates of pulling off. And they found what they call the 4% rule, saying 4% of that money, if you pulled that off, you could live on that indefinitely without drawing down your principal.
Okay.
Okay? So let's go ahead and try and figure out what our 4% rule is going to be.
Okay.
Let's get some basic numbers here. Obviously, when we do this officially, we'll be pulling our budget and we'll look at what we actually are spending every month and when we look at being financially independent and retiring. But for today, let's just get some basic ideas of what some numbers might be. So you kind of know our basic budgets and kind of what we spend and can give us a basic numbers, right?
Yes.
All right, cool. So we got a calculator here that you can go ahead and run these numbers on. But what would you say is the minimum number that you would feel comfortable living off of, drawing from your investments without having a job?
Do we have a mortgage?
It's a very good question. So let's run this two separate ways. Let's run it once as if we retire while we still have a mortgage and we haven't finished paying it off. And we'll run it again as if we've already gotten to the point where our mortgage is paid off and we're not requiring that income. So give me two numbers, I guess.
Okay. So I would say the first number, which would be if we still had a mortgage, would be $5,000 a month, would be what I would want to make and live off of.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's run with the mortgage still $5,000 a month. So go ahead and put $5,000 into your calculator.
Okay.
Okay. Now per month, so we need the annual number. So multiply that by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. What do you got?
60,000.
60,000. So we need $60,000 a year to live off of. Now, it also sometimes is called the 25 times rule because the way that you get your number is you find your annual number and you multiply that by 25. So go ahead and multiply 60,000 by 25.
Okay.
And you get what?
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million. So if we currently had $1.5 million, it would give us a return where we could pull 4% off of that and be able to live on $5,000 a month.
So you're assuming that because I'm pulling 4% off of this number is growing by 4%?
That number is growing by 4% plus the rate of inflation.
Okay.
And hopefully more than that, right? So it's not any less than that. So most years rate of inflation is about 3%. So you would want somewhere around 7% of a return on your investment. So you'll see in a lot of my videos, I use 7% as my number for my return on investment. And this is kind of where that number is. I'm basing it off expecting to pull off 4% for living on, 3% for growth, and a little more for that, meaning I'll never touch the principal.
Okay.
Okay. And the reason why you want to count inflation in there is because as every year goes on, you don't want to feel more poor because your number is $5,000. You don't want to be at the beginning of your retirement and $5,000 is what you can live on. But every year the cost of living goes up by 3%. And now you need 5,000 plus 3%, and the next year you need 5,000 whatever plus 3%. So
okay.
You want to make sure that you count inflation in there too. So
got it.
So 1.5 million would be the number we'd be looking for. One thing also to consider is we don't currently have $1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't retire today. So if we were saying, okay, well, let's figure out how long it's going to take us to get to 1.5 million, we need to factor in what inflation is going to be at that time of retirement, and make sure that we rerun our numbers and that day's numbers, and make sure if 5,000 is still the number we feel comfortable with.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because 5,000 might inflate to 6,000 at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and then we need to make sure we're factoring in 6,000 times 25, or
Okay.
times 12 times 25.
Sure.
Okay? All right, so 1.5 million if you want to live off $5,000 a month. Now, we get to the point, mortgage is paid off. What was your other number you were thinking?
Well, in today's dollars, which it sounds like might be a little bit different from 20 years from now's dollars.
Okay.
But in today's dollars, probably 3,500.
Okay, so let's look at those numbers. So 3,500 times 12,
42,000.
42,000. All right, and 42,000 times 25.
1,050,000.
All right, so just over $1 million, and we can have $3,500 a month to live off of, plus inflation every year.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the numbers that you're looking at. So when you're trying to figure out what your FI number is, that's kind of where you're going at to figure out when you can retire early and stop working.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say you need $3,500 to live off of, and you want your income to lessen. You don't have to get to this $1 million
Mm-hmm.
right away. Let's say you just don't want to be working full time.
Mm-hmm.
You're willing to work a little bit, and so maybe you can live off of 2,000, and you're willing to make another 1,500.
Sure.
Right? So this number is your complete financial independence number, where you don't have to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be the number that gets you out of what your current situation is. So we'll discuss more what the different financial stepping stones might be in another video. I'm going to kind of use them more like different baby steps or stepping stones, or however you want to say it, to get yourself up to whatever level of financial independence you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But for today, this tells us what the 4% rule is and how we can use it to figure out what our financial independence number is.
Awesome.
Does it make sense?
It does.
Great. Well, if you guys had any questions on what the 4% rule is, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and if I can answer them, I'll help you. Otherwise, I encourage you to run these numbers for yourself, figure out what your financial independence number is, and look up some more information on what the 4% rule is and how it applies to you. Thanks for watching.